Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OnlyLandFans show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Peter Nukasani. Peter Nukasani from Once Upon a Brick Inc. is a land flipper with a unique approach to the business. Rather than sending mail and buying properties directly from private owners, he buys land from other land investors at wholesale prices. Then he sells half of the lots for retail to individuals, and half of them he resells to other land investors at wholesale prices where they can make a healthy profit. Since 2021, he has bought and sold over 1,500 parcels and supplies 50 of the leading land companies with inventory for them to resell. Peter, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
Good, Kendall. The intro is always fires.
Super excited to have you. You are back by popular demand, and it's a very special episode today because this is a masterclass, and the title of your masterclass is Building a Land Note Portfolio from 0 to 10K a month. So first of all, talk to me a little bit about how did you develop this strategy? How did you start putting together portfolios to get you passive income every single month?
Yeah. So I think to really paint the picture, I got to explain from where I started.
Yeah.
So I started this during like my last year of college, I believe. And I started with about $2,000. And the reason why I got into land was because I couldn't do anything else. I was pretty much unlendable for doing like short-term rentals or something because I was still in college, didn't have a W-2 or anything like that. So I started looking up alternative ways to invest into real estate. And there was like mobile homes, there was all kinds of stuff, tax lien investing, and then land also came up. How I got into land was buying my first few deals I had a budget of $2,000 that I've saved up from doing other stuff. And I went on landwatch.com and I was trying to find the cheapest piece of land that was on there. And I was really shocked because it said, I think that $1,500 or $1,000 was like this quarter acre piece of land in Hallbrook, Arizona, in the middle of nowhere. And soon enough, I started doing research and I was like, there's all these random different companies that are selling all these parcels. Let me call one of them. So I called a few people, and the one I resonated with was a land investor. His name is Matt Nunn from Nunn Land Sales. So I called him and I was like, hey, there's this whole business. We buy and sell vacant parcels of land all over the country. I don't live in Arizona, but I sell land in Arizona. I buy it from people who don't want it, and then I make the spread in between. And I was just shocked because I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and you're like, oh, the wealthy own real estate and all this great stuff. So I was like, great, let me try to become wealthy by buying some type of real estate. And so anyway, so he told me, and I asked him, because from my previous businesses, when I did t-shirts, we would never try to manufacture the t-shirt itself. We would buy t-shirts from middlemen, and they did all the importing from China and like all these different countries for clothing. So I'm like, hey, you know how to send mailers? He was talking about mailers. I was pretty clueless on what that was and like how to even do that. So I was like, hey, can I buy a few parcels of land from you and you cut me some kind of discount so that I can do the same thing that you're doing? And I'll just come back to you and I'll keep buying from you. And in one of Matt's advertising, he said, oh, own this piece of land for $100 a month. And I was, what do you mean $100 a month? Own land for $100 a month? So I started asking him about owner financing, and because he was advertising for that. And then I learned about it. And so I bought like 3 or 4 parcels from him, and it was like $2,000. He really helped me out with those first 3 to 4 parcels. And I turned around and I was like, okay, I bought 3, I think it was 3 or 4, I don't remember, but let's just say 3. I bought 3 of them for $2,000. So that came out to about $700 per property. And I was like, I probably should have charged more, but it was my first time and I didn't really know how to do it. So I was like, okay, let me sell this for $39 a month for 48 months or 36 months. Because I realized, hey, I only have $700 in this thing. And in 13 months or 14 months, I'll get all of my money back. And the remaining terms or the remaining months is all profit. So I literally had an old domain, onceuponabrick.com, that was a Lego business. And I didn't want to come up with a new name. So I just used the Lego business domain, built a website, and posted on Land Century. And then people started calling a few days later. And that's how we sold the first note.
Wow. Okay, so something that I've known you for a little bit of time now. One of the things that I love so much about you, Peter, and I think that's so reflected in that story is that you are an action taker. You're like, I already have a domain. It was for a Lego business. That's fine. I'll just go ahead and use that. Let's just get this thing off the ground. And so I love that because as beginners, it can be really tempting to I need to get my LLC and the perfect domain name, and then I need to spend a month trying to figure out a logo and all this other stuff. And you were like, oh no, we're gonna hit the ground. We're going. So I love that so much. Can you talk a little bit about exactly what is owner financing? So we may have some people that are listening to this that are used to the traditional we buy at 20, we sell at 40 kind of thing. And it's just a land flipping transactional style to that transaction. So can you talk to us about exactly what is owner financing?
Yes. So I'm sure there's like a fancy legal lawyer answer to this thing, but I'm going to try to make this as simple as I possibly can.
Yes.
So I would think about it as a payment plan. That's how I've always thought about it. Instead of putting up all the amount of dollars all at once to buy a specific piece of land, you are basically taking the price of the land and you're splitting it up over a period of time, whether it be like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you're basically breaking that down into payments. And you use what's called a contract for deed. At least that's what we do. And it just says, hey, I'm agreeing to make this payment for this amount of time. And this is the total at this percent interest, and just different agreements. And once I've done paying it off, you're going to deed the property to me. So it's an agreement for a payment plan. And sometimes people charge interest, they charge doc fees and things like that. So when you buy a house on a loan, that's pretty much what it is, except it's not the owner that's financing the property to you, it's the bank. And when you offer owner financing, you become the bank.
Mm. Now that is powerful. That's really good stuff. What I love about that as well is that it opens up your buyer pool, right? So not everyone may have $30,000 to buy a piece of property, but they may have a couple of hundred a month that they can put towards paying a property, right? Now, why would someone want to do an owner finance deal? Like, why would someone want to be on a payment plan with you over like just trying to go to a bank and getting financing on a piece of vacant land?
Definitely, there's a lot of people that still do buy cash with no financing or no owner financing, or they set up financing through the bank or whatever. But often it's super challenging trying to actually attain a bank loan for buying vacant land. At least that's been my experience.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's the case for everybody, but I've just noticed in general, it's hard to get banks to loan on land. And I think that's also partially why the opportunity exists for us as investors.
I love that so much. So you have found a gap that needs to be filled, right? Because people can't go to traditional banks and say, hey, I want to take a loan out to buy this one little infill lot parcel. I know that there are commercial loans and people can get some type of lending on like large subdivide properties and things like that. But if the average person just wants to go and say, hey, I really like this lot, I want to buy it, maybe to hunt on later or just to park an RV or maybe build on, it can be challenging for them to get a bank to actually finance a piece of vacant land, right? So here's where you step in with this incredible strategy. I love this. So let's dig into, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the biggest risks associated with carrying a note right? So you are buying a piece of property at like a wholesale price, right? You're paying all cash for it. And then you're turning around and creating a note or a payment plan for a buyer when they buy that piece of property from you. You mentioned you get your money back in the example that you gave us, like 13 months. What happens if they just stop paying?
Oh, that happens often, especially. So one thing to keep in mind is there's like a threshold, right? The way that we do owner financing, we're on the lower cost side. We specialize in like lower cost properties currently, and we try to do that at a higher volume. And that's how we've set up our business to this point. So the way that you avoid, we can go into this more about like how to avoid defaults and how to do all that stuff, but it is very common. It happens a lot, and especially if you make it super easy. So we've set up our payments to be like, okay, your first month's payment is the down payment. So there's no down payment, there's no credit checks or anything like that. And you can do this for what's right for your business, right? And it's not the case for when you're selling a $5,000 to $10,000 piece of land. It's not the same as offering owner financing on a $100,000 to $300,000 property. So there's different levels to it, and usually as you transition up and start taking down payments of 10 grand or 5 grand down, you're going to significantly reduce the number of defaults because you usually get a more qualified and a more serious customer. Because when someone puts down $100 a month or signs up for $100 a month payment plan and there's no recourse, meaning they would rather pay some other bill or something before paying the land thing, because there's nothing to lose if they stop paying their land beside the property. But a lot of times these properties, they don't live next to them, so they're not really being utilized, and it's more of a novelty purchase.
Got it.
Just depends on the customer.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So, can you walk us through, just give us an example with some numbers of a deal that you've done that you would consider to be like your bread and butter note type deal that you've created. How much did you buy it for? How much did you put it under contract for in terms of creating the note? And what type of buyer was it?
Yeah. So I'll talk about a deal it's a common one that a lot of land investors do, and it's in a common market. We just changed pricing on it, so I'm pulling it up. But It is in Costilla County, Colorado. It's like a 5-acre parcel. And usually I think we were able to buy them for about 3 to 4 grand, maybe a little less sometimes, but about 3 grand. And we're offering financing on this for $249 a month for 48 months. So it comes out to about 9,000 over 4 years. And we bought it for 3,000.
Got it. Okay. So what type of property is this? Is it, you mentioned 5 acres. Is it like out in the country? Is it really far away removed? How far, for those of us who are listening that are not familiar with Castillo County, can you tell us about like how far is it from a major city and just the specifications of the property? What does it look like?
Sure. So the two types of land that we usually focus on is we have done a lot of residential infill lots and subdivisions, just giant subdivisions that there's just tons of cheap lots available. And the second one is properties like these. These are like rural recreational. They're maybe like 2-3 hours or an hour away from some type of city. And people go out there for camping, or they want to take their RV out there just to own land. So it's not like in a bustling town or anything crazy like that. So it's rural recreational land and it's residential infill, which are much smaller, like a 1/4 acre or 1/3 of an acre, like that kind of like home lots.
Got it. So we talked to a lot of people on our show about what is the buying criteria for these types of properties. Lots of land flippers that are looking to either subdivide or buy a piece of property at a discount, sell it at a premium. They absolutely always say a deal killer is road access. Is that the same for you? What types of property, what types of components of the property or specs of the property kill the deal? Will you do a no road access or landlocked deal?
I bought some on accident because I didn't really do much of a due diligence or research. But so there's a couple, there's definitely a lot, but the major ones that you could be worried about is number one, like you said, Kendall, road access, right? Even if it's a dirt road, a lot of these cheaper properties, they do have access issues where they're like so far out there and there's no legal deeded access. We're not acquiring any more new inventory that has like access issues because that usually kills the deal. Number two is like holding costs, right? So how much does it cost for me to retain ownership of this property over the life of the note? For example, there are places, especially like certain subdivisions, where they have very high HOA fees. For you to own this property, it's fine if you own one or two, but when you buy like 200 or 300 of them and they send you a bill for the HOA fee, it can add up very quickly. So holding costs, right? Property taxes, how much are the taxes, right? Because if you're retaining ownership of these, all this stuff matters and eats into your margin. And of course, you can have the person who signs up for the note pay all these things, but if it's in your name, you usually got to take care of it. So I always look at holding costs, road access, the size, of course. I've noticed that the bigger the property, usually it sells a lot better.
Interesting. So I noticed that you didn't mention anything about utilities, water or electricity, that type of thing. These rural recreational properties, I'm assuming, don't have utility access. So that's not a deal killer for you. You'll still move forward if it doesn't have utilities, or what's your approach to that?
Yeah, so utilities is huge, right? You can apply this owner financing model to any piece of land for the most part. There's $1 million ranches, there's multi-million-dollar ranches that get sold with owner financing. But then there's also $5,000 to $10,000 pieces of land that get sold for $100 a month or $150 a month. So it just depends. For this business, like our cheaper stuff that we're doing, we're not really too that worried about utilities, but a lot of people will ask you about utilities. That's something to keep in mind. So it takes a very specific type of buyer to want to buy like super rural recreational property. But again, you could, instead of doing 2 or 4, $5,000 to $10,000 deals, you could just do one, like some kind of subdivision where there is utilities access and avoid the problem altogether. So there's different types of buyers for different things, but utilities is a concern. But again, if someone's buying a $5,000 to $10,000 property, they can only be so picky on what to expect.
Got it. Got it. So this is a really interesting model because I think that a lot of it hinges on the acquisitions. And so I think a lot of people might be listening to this and saying, oh my gosh, how are you getting a piece of property for $3,000 and it's 5 acres or something like that? So can you talk about your acquisitions process and how do you find these types of deals? That way you can turn them into notes.
Yeah. So my favorite thing to do is actually, because I'm lazy when it comes to that, is I like to take the path of least resistance and not have to send mailers, not have to talk to sellers, and just go to build a relationship or build a few relationships with other land investors who have these systems and have a buying process and a team and all that good stuff. And basically just go to them and being like, hey, if you have a month where your mailers really do well and you get tons of properties, can I buy these from you? If you buy them for, let's say, Costilla, right? Maybe they get them for 1,800 or 2,000 and they sell it to me for 3,000 or 2,800. For them, that's still a great return because they'll know, okay, I can just text Peter and he'll buy it. And I can, on day one of me sending out the money to the seller, on day 2, I'll get this money back. I love doing that. And a few great ways to do that is So when I started, I pretty much emailed or cold called everyone off LandWatch. And I just looked up 0 to 50,000 who has land listed. And I try to like cold call them, especially if I notice that they have tons of listings or tons of the same type of properties. I would try to email them or cold call them. Also, just posting in Facebook groups that there's tons of them out there and being like, hey, this is my name. This is what I'm looking for. This is my budget or whatever. And there's people that post their deals in Facebook groups too. So it's a very manual process, but you only need 5, or not even 5, even a couple or one when you're getting started. And they'll start sending you deals. And you
Love
don't have,
that.
yeah.
That's very cool. That is very cool. So let's chat a little bit about if someone is listening to this and, you know what, I think I'm going to do this. I'd love to give this a shot. Can you walk us through step by step of what they need to do in order to be able to find the lot, get the lot, buy it, turn around, create a note? What does all of that look like from start to finish?
Yeah. So first is identify who you're going to buy this property from. If you already have a traditional process to acquire properties, whether it's like cold calling or texting or mailing or whatever it is that you do, that's great. But if you don't have that, the first thing to do is try to find people that you can buy these properties from. So it can be wholesalers or it can be other land investors. And you can do so, like we were talking about, through Facebook groups and cold outreach. So once you've identified that and they've sent you a deal, being like, hey, I have all these 5 acres in Costilla County, Colorado. This is how much I want from them, for them. So then you would go do your research and pull comps off of LandWatch or Zillow, and you can start seeing what your market competition looks like. A lot of times what happens is when people try to sell wholesale to other investors, they try to squeeze the juice out of that property completely. And that's honestly been a little bit of our competitive advantage but it's to make sure that the person who's buying, like the investor, can make a profit on it. So you have to be very careful, especially if you don't have a relationship with the company or the investor, to make sure you're not overpaying for when you're buying, right? So if someone sends you a deal and they're charging on LandWatch, if they're trying to sell it to the end buyer for $4,000 and they're like, I'll sell it to you for $3,900 and there's only $100 margin on it, it's stupid and it's not going to work. So make sure to do your research once you start receiving those deals, and you can do that through comping. And it's a lengthy process, but I think it's worth explaining. So I'll continue.
No, that's exactly what this is for. We want to know what's the step by step. Before we move forward to the next step, I have a question about, I know that a lot of people, and you mentioned it as well, whenever you're creating an owner finance type of note, oftentimes you can typically get a little bit more for the property than if you were selling it for cash, right? So I know a lot of investors, they have like, my cash price might be 5,000, but the owner finance price is 9,000 or something like that, right? So if you are taking that into consideration, your owner finance price, what rule of thumb do you have to be able to say, okay, this is a good price on the buy side for me? So let's say a seller or a wholesaler you're working with has a property that is 5,000 retail market price. They don't come down on it, but maybe you can get 9,000 as an owner finance deal when you turn around and sell it to a buyer. Would you consider making that spread, or do you only buy discount, or what's your thought process behind that?
Absolutely. So I think the way that because here's the thing, you need to be paid for the risk that you're taking. If you're putting up the money, you're doing the marketing, you're putting in the work, you should not be doing deals that are not very profitable for you, right? Because it's best just not to do the deal, because you need to be compensated for the risk and the money and effort and time that you're putting into this deal.
Right.
So with that said, I only try to buy things that I can at least double or triple on cash prices. So for example, if Costilla, we can sell a 5-acre property for $5,000 cash, I am not paying anything more than 2,500.
Got it.
And our owner financing comes out to 8,900.
Okay. Interesting. So what's the calculations that you use to figure out what your terms are going to be?
And that's the beautiful thing about it, is there is no like really set rule. I think it's just you need to look for your target return. And also with that said, it's to what's your desired target return, the time frame, and also your competition. So you can see if the third one's pretty important, the competition, like what is this 5-acre similar property going for on owner financing down the street or on LandWatch. So that way you can understand where things are at. But also it's very flexible, right? If you're like, hey, I'll take a little bit less, but instead of a 5-year term, I would rather take a 3-year. I want to get all my money back in 3 years, so I'll charge more per month, but it'll only be over 3 years instead of 5. So you can play around with that. It's what's important to you.
Got it. And so if someone's never done this before, like what would be a decent benchmark for them to just say at least to get started? So let's just use an example. We're in Castillo County. That county, let's say it's 5 acres, market price is 5K. How would they go about determining the terms? What would be considered good terms to you as an expert for a newbie, a beginner to shoot for?
Yeah, usually on that's the beauty of this business too with land, is like in houses or house wholesaling or whatever, the margins are definitely not there to double your money each time. If you're buying something for 100, it's very rare to maybe sell it for 200 or something like that. But with land, it's totally possible sometimes, or most times. I would say my target return on a cash deal is to at least a double, or like 2 to 3x. And then on owner financing, it's about 3 to 4.5x.
Okay.
Is how I look at it. So if you look at the Costilla deal, that was a buy for 2,500 and sell for 8,900 owner financed. So we do the math on that. That comes out to, so we're selling it at about 3.5 times more than what we bought it for.
Got it. Got it. So you mentioned competition. How do you position your pricing? Like what would be considered good in terms of a good price to compete in a market, right? So let's say everyone is listing an owner finance deal, total purchase price is 9K, 9,000. How much lower would you want to be?
It doesn't have to be a lot, but there's always different things that you can compete on. You can compete on price. That's what I did when I started, because I was new and I needed to get some deals under my belt and start building up notes. So when I started, I would start competing on price. And so that means I'll try to be the cheapest and offer the best deal just to get the deal. But
Right.
as you have more notes and as you start doing more deals, you can become more patient, because then you don't really need that deal you can wait for that deal to sell just a little bit longer. So maybe 2 months. So when I first started, I was like, I would want to sell it right away. But now I don't mind waiting an extra month for the deal to sell, as long as we hit our return.
Got it.
So you can compete on many things. You can compete on better marketing. You can compete on price. You can compete on channel. So if everybody's blowing up LandWatch, then go on Facebook Marketplace or some other channel where you have a competitive advantage. So price isn't always the only thing to compete on, but it's often a really good one to compete on when you're starting, just to get things going.
Excellent. So coming back to the deal evaluation, right? Analyzing to see if this is a deal, what your terms would be when you're putting together this particular note. Talk to us about the length of time. What's a good rule of thumb for how long you should finance a property for? Hey, land fans, looking for your tribe of serious land investors? Join thousands of your fellow land lovers in the OnlyLandFans Facebook group. We're talking real deals, expert strategies, and game-changing connections you won't find anywhere else. This isn't just another real estate group. This is the community where land investors come to level up. Join us at onlylandfansgroup.com and join the conversation today. That's onlylandfansgroup.com. See you there.
Yeah, you definitely, unless it's like $1 million property or $1 million ranch, you definitely don't want to be like do a 30-year term like a mortgage or something like that.
Right.
I think what's more appropriate could be like a car term. So to think about it on your regular car term. And those are, I'm not really too sure, but I think those are like 4, 5, 6 years, 3 years, 7 years.
Got it.
Usually, I think, right? 3 to 7 years.
Yeah, something like that. Okay. And so you aim, what determining factor comes into play whenever you're thinking about, do I want to owner finance this for 3 years or 7 years? Because that's a pretty big gap. So how do you figure out how long exactly you want to finance this, other than just like how fast I want my money back?
I think it varies, but one thing I will say to preface this is there's two things that are super important, right? First thing is how soon you can get your money back. And my target's always 1 year at least. I mean, to the max. So sometimes you might need to offer or demand a down payment to hit that number. So let's say you bought for 10 grand and you're selling it for 25. What you could do is say 5 grand down when you buy, and then you divide that other 5 grand over 12 payments. So then you still get your $10,000 back. 400 or 450 a month and $5,000 down payment should cover it within a year. So your payback time period, super important. And your second thing that you want to think about is it's this really fancy term, and I barely understand it, but it's super important. It's called your internal rate of return. So it has to do with like time value of money. And a dollar today, it's just money today is more valuable than some money in the future. So you can calculate that by using an internal rate of return calculator. It's free on Google. And so it's always best to compress your timelines, because it's better to receive that money much faster, unless you are okay with it, unless you're charging interest maybe, and the longer the term of the loan, the more you're collecting in interest income.
Got it. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, but when I started, I tried to keep it really simple. Like I did 3 years, and now we're dabbling with some longer notes. But yeah, 3 years when I started, because it was cheaper property. And also, how do you decide? You gotta also think about affordability of payment too from the person that's buying. So it's more of an art and not really a science currently for us. And we try to think of what is a note that people would most likely be able or be interested in paying, right? Because if I say, oh, pay me 3 grand a month for a year, it's not that attractive versus maybe 400 a month over 10 years for a $40,000 property or something.
Got it. So can you talk a little bit about interest rate? Because you mentioned interest rate. I know that I've had some conversations with buyers about owner finance deals, and that's one of the first questions that they always ask is they want to know about down payment, they want to know about the monthly payment, and they want to know about the interest rate. So how do you approach interest rate when you are engineering these deals?
Till now, we've done a lot of cheaper properties. So we haven't really messed around with interest rates. What we've done is just build in interest. So like how we were talking about earlier about a cash price being maybe 5 grand, and then a owner financing price being about 10,000. So what we've actually done is you can actually do the math on this using an interest calculator to find out what your actual interest rate is. But to keep things really simple and for marketing purposes, we've also just stuck with a owner financing price and a cash price. And technically, we were not charging any like compounding or percentage interest, but it was already included in the price. But a lot of people do charge interest, and owner financing will always most likely be more than the bank.
Got it. So more than the bank.
Yep.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and that's totally normal because like people, because you can't, money to you and me is more costly to borrow than for JP Morgan Chase to borrow from the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
So that's why it's more expensive. It costs us more.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So let's go back to that step by step. So we talked about how you found the deal, how you evaluate the deal, engineer what that transaction would be, right? Like what the terms would be for that note. What's the next step after you
Analyze the deal and you put together some potential numbers on how you're going to sell it. So after you've done all that, you buy the property. Once you've done your due diligence, then you list it on different marketplaces and just start marketing and trying to find buyers.
Excellent. Can you talk to us a little bit about now, you've walked through one deal? This is how we do one deal. What is the systematic approach that you've taken to get from 0 to 10K a month using notes?
Yeah. Kendall, could you repeat that question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So how do you build a note portfolio where you have multiple deals? How do you do that and get up to that 10K a month that we were talking about earlier? Is there a systematic process that you've taken? How can people go about from getting one deal under contract and creating one note to actually scaling that to 10K or more a month? If you're enjoying this episode of the OnlyLandFans podcast, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. Now let's get back to the action.
There's a couple of things. You also need to solve a capital problem, right? Because what's going to happen, which is why I kept emphasizing, it's super important to get your money back quickly. Because unless you're starting very well capitalized, you're going to eventually run out of money to buy more property to sell on owner financing. So what I did when I started was I bought some properties that I could afford doing, and I sold some cash. And anytime I got a cash deal, I would go buy more deals. And every dollar that came in, I would just keep reinvesting and buying more property. So buy one, sell one, buy two, sell two, buy three, sell three, and it starts compounding. And then later, I also started doing a little bit of land arb, and that's like a whole nother rabbit hole. But basically, land arb is, and I bought 300 properties doing 300 parcels doing this strategy, is so let's just say a land investor has tons of land and he's okay, I'll owner finance you these properties. So what you're doing is you're buying them on owner financing. Let's just say 20 parcels, 36-month term. Then you're going off, and let's say that they're like, okay, I'll sell you 20 parcels for $500 a month or $1,000 a month. What you're doing is looking at your per month cost. And if it's costing you $20 or $25 a month, you can go out and sell it for $75 to $100 to a retail customer. So then you're not having to put up all the money, all the cash right away, and you're able to do the same thing. You're getting leverage.
Excellent. That's very cool. So you buy it on terms and then you turn around and sell on terms.
Yeah.
Right. Just doing like a wrap. Cool. Yeah. Really cool. So could you talk a little bit about when you are servicing these notes, right? So like how do you go about managing a portfolio of 300 notes? How do you do that?
Oh, it's a nightmare. It's very challenging and it takes a lot. But here's the thing. Why we were talking about this of getting from 0 to 10K a month, right? It's not super, it doesn't sound like amazingly exciting, but because you hear about all these great titles, make $5 million on a land deal or something crazy like that. But what it can do is you can build a portfolio of notes from 0 to 10 grand where it's very manageable and it's very easy and it's not overwhelming. At the height of it, we had 80 something notes, and those were bringing in about 40K a month in income. But that was a full-time business handling all those notes. We had a customer service person, and then we had a customer service, and these were all US based people. And then we had an answer force line for people to call in, and we would get like people calling in for, oh, I want to change my card. Can I pay this off? How much is it to pay it off? So what I would say is, and when we can go into the next point about go big as fast as you can, is like managing notes can become a job, right? But it can be done in a way where if you have 50 notes or 40 notes, it's not really that hard. And you can manage it on a spreadsheet. You can do an Airtable. And also there's software. And I can mention a few, Kendall, if you want.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can look at like Your Land Loans. They can do the note stuff, and Moon Clerk. But I would definitely recommend more so of the first one because it's more of an easier way to manage your notes. But yeah, but if you have a small portfolio of notes, it's just super easy to manage compared to where we were at, where it was a full-time job and it gets very challenging. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but at 40 to 50 notes, you can definitely do it, and it gives you a lot of freedom.
Excellent. So can you talk a little bit about how much would someone need? You mentioned you had $2,000 when you started to buy your first few properties. What if someone's looking to literally go from 0 to 10K a month in profit using their note portfolio? How much does it cost to get started, would you say? And then how many properties would you say would be about where they would need to be in their portfolio to get up to that 10K number?
So the last part is hard because you could just get a giant property maybe if you have a couple million sitting around and get $10,000 a month off one note and you're done.
Yeah,
right?
but if we don't have just the million sitting around, what is
Right.
like if someone is just now getting into this, maybe they flipped a few properties, but they want to start building their note portfolio.
Yeah.
What can they expect in terms of like capital to start? And then what should be like a goal for them if they're like, okay, maybe I need to get 20 properties, 30 notes. What does that look like? Listen up, land fans. This is huge. We're bringing you the one and only Pace Morby, star of A&E's Triple Digit Flip and the mastermind behind $450 million in real estate deals. He's coming to our virtual meetup on Thursday, December 5th to share how he's applying his creative financing genius to land deals. Head to olfmeetup.com to save your spot today. That's olfmeetup.com. This is the kind of opportunity that changes everything.
Yeah, and I think it can be overwhelming and intimidating when you're thinking about the long run, like trying to get to 40, 50 notes, because you're like, oh, I have to have money to buy 40 to 50 properties. But it goes by very quickly. You can start with $5,000, $10,000 and buy your first couple. And as long as you can keep reinvesting and maybe throw in some land arb deals in there, because land arb, you can start buying properties for $500 down and $500 a month. So then you get crazy leverage. But yeah, I think I don't even know to get to 40, 50 properties, how much it could cost. But let's just say the Costilla deal. And that's not the greatest example because there's better deals out there. It's just a super common one that a lot of the red ocean land people do is, let's say those $2,500 deals, if you bought 40 of them, I think it comes out to $100,000, but you don't have to do that right away on day one. And I think I never thought about it. I focused on $2,000, these 3 properties in Holbrook, Arizona, and getting $40 or $50 a month for them, and then reinvesting and then putting in some land arb.
Got it. So is that how much you were how much you were charging, 40 or 50 bucks a month?
Yeah, I wouldn't do that again.
Oh man.
I wouldn't do that again, but it got me started and just reinvesting.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned land arb. If someone is interested in trying that for the first time, how do you go about negotiating with people to get properties on seller financing? Like, how do you, what's the negotiation strategy? How do you find those properties? Are you still using wholesalers to do that?
Yeah.
How do you go about that?
Yeah, I think the path of least resistance is to find a land investor who will land arb it to you. I can mention one which I have zero affiliation with if you want, Kendall.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's called land. I think the company is called Land Arb Guys. That's literally the name of their company.
Mhm.
And I'm on their email list, so I get their emails. I have no affiliation with them. But there are other land investors who do offer land arb, and it's something that you can bring up, especially on portfolio deals.
Mm.
And that's what changed the game for me, because I don't think I would have been able to do it. Because my first land arb deal, it was like 20 parcels in Valencia County, New Mexico. The note was $400 a month for me. So I think it was, yeah, $20, or it was less than that. But from the same people, I bought 200 to 300 parcels, all on land arb. Because I did one deal with them, sold all of them. 6 months later, went back, and instead of 20 parcels, I bought 50 from them. And then I
Mm.
sold them, went back 75 parcels, 100 parcels. So we did 5 deals altogether.
Wow. So let's dig into that 20 parcel portfolio. What did that, so you mentioned it was $400 a month for you. Was that for all 20 properties?
Yeah, it was like a quarter acre in Valencia County, New Mexico, and we started selling those at $39 a month. And it cost me, I think, 15 or 20 bucks. I don't remember the full details, but it was cool because I was starting to get monthly payments, more than double of what it's costing me
Yeah.
every month.
That's really cool. So, can you talk a little bit about whenever you're putting together, like when you're buying like a portfolio, like of 20 properties, are you comping every last one of those properties? How do you know that you'll be able to sell all of them on owner financing?
You don't know if you're going to be able to sell all of them, but they're all the same type of properties. So they were all like a quarter acre in Valencia County, New Mexico, in Rio del Oro, which was like this abandoned old subdivision. And so the comps, it's cookie cutter. Like you're doing comps because it's pretty much all the same land. There's no piece of land that's exactly always all the same or whatever. But if it's in the same area, the same size, and no special features, you can just do one comp for all 20 of them.
Got it. And so do you remember what the terms were that you bought on and then the terms that you sold it on? So you were paying 400 for 20
Yeah.
over how long?
Let me see if I can pull up an old contract.
Yeah.
This is going to be challenging. This is from years ago.
Or maybe just give us an example if you can't remember. If there's another portfolio that's fresher in your memory, that's cool too.
Yeah, it's just been a long time since we have done land arb again, because now, for the most part, we're buying all of them outright. Okay, this one, let's see. Okay, so this one was for actually 60 parcels. Very interesting. June 2020, that was that contract. So the deal was for $20,000, and we put $2,000 down. And the remaining month amount of $18,000 was to be financed for $500 a month, paid over 36 months with no interest. So there was definite negotiation on that. I'm pretty sure I negotiated price. So this land investor basically said, give me $2,000 down and pay me $500 a month for 60 months. No, not for 60 months, for 36 months. So I paid off the balance of 18 grand for 60 parcels.
Got it. And then based on that, is that what you then used as a benchmark for how the terms were going to be when you created the notes that you sold? Or was the length of time on the notes that you sold, were those like longer than 36 months, or did you use 36 months? What was that like?
Yeah, so I was thinking like, hey, I'm gonna finish paying these off in 36 months. So let me also sell them at 36 months, right? So I sold them for $39 a month for 36 months. And 39 times 36. So it came out to 1404 per month. And then the note cost me $500 a month. And so our net profit might have been like $900 a month.
Excellent. Really good. Very cool. Very cool. You mentioned earlier contract for deed. Can you talk about some of the actual legal documents that you use when you're doing these owner finance deals?
Yeah, so we use what's called a contract for deed. It's pretty common, but I would definitely have an attorney or somebody look at it, but you can just use, I didn't when I started. Now we have them look at it, but it's just a contract for deed or an owner financing contract.
Okay.
And you can find it on Google.
Excellent. And so talk to us about what happens when people default, right? Like, I think that might be if someone's never done an owner finance deal, that's probably one of the biggest questions that they have. What happens if someone stops paying me?
Dealing with non-paying customers. Yeah, but I would like to say one thing because I want to be very clear and make sure that I'm transparent about this. So I would say my one piece of it, there's many different things I could share, but as far as notes, I would say to go big as fast as you can. So meaning is don't try to have a whole bunch of notes like we did, 100 to 200 or 300 notes. That's not really that. It's fine, but it's going to create a ton of work, a ton of management. So whatever you can afford to go, reduce the number of transactions and focus on increasing that monthly profit and that monthly income, right? Because number of properties or number of notes, I would rather have maybe 10 notes that pay me $5,000 a month, and that's $50,000 a month, rather than having 300 or 400 notes, because then I'm dealing with 10 customers and not 300.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. That makes total sense. So back to the non-paying customers.
Yeah.
How do you deal with those people and what is that process like? And what happens if someone all of the things about what happens when people stop paying
Yeah.
you on the notes?
Yep. So in the contract, you can specify it to say that if someone misses a payment, they have 30 days to make that payment. And if they don't, they lose the property or they default. So what happens is, first thing is when they sign the contract, it already says that in there, that they have 30 days from the date that they miss a payment to catch up on making a payment. And if they don't, then they lose the property. But our technical process of getting the properties back is, since the property is still held in our name using a contract for deed, they get an email notification as soon as they miss a payment with a 30-day default notice. It's automatic. So if you use softwares like I mentioned earlier for notes, some of these softwares do it for you.
Got it. That was Moonclerk and Your Land Loans.
I would lean more so on if you want the best without it costing a ton, it's Your Land Loans. You can do that in, and they have the systems and all that set up for that.
That's great.
Yep, and it's not that expensive
That's awesome
to have. So yeah, so that is what you can use for notes. But as far as they get an email notification saying 30-day default notice. You've missed a payment. It's okay. You have 30 days. If you want to keep this property, you have to catch up in 30 days, or not, you're going to lose the property and it gets repossessed. Some people have gone as far as to send physical letters as a default notice to notify the customer of like loss of property. This can get like somewhat, it just depends. It gets complicated, but that's how we've done it. And if you're concerned, you can always talk to a real estate attorney in the state that you're operating in, because I don't want to give out legal advice on that.
Of course. So the way that your company approaches it is they don't get the property doesn't get transferred into their name until they completely pay off the property, right? Yeah. Now, do you also have some type of stipulations in your paperwork that they can't build on the property until it's paid off, or what does that look like?
Yeah, that's another thing to completely avoid is, and we were talking about can you repeat the question, Kendall?
Yeah. So do you have some type of stipulation in your paperwork that says they can't build on the property until they've completely paid off the property? Like what happens if they build on the property and then they default? Like now you have a structure on your property, right? So how do you go about handling that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that comes down to clear communication too, because in our terms of service on our website and in the contract, we do not allow anyone to actually build or develop. If they want to camp on there, that's cool. But sometimes they'll reach out and being like, hey, can I develop on this property? And we're like, absolutely not. But if you want to pay it off, you're more than welcome to do whatever you want after the deed is transferred into your name.
Got it. Got it. Excellent. So let's talk about marketing a little bit in terms of selling the properties. You mentioned Facebook Marketplace. I think I've even seen some land investors use TikTok to sell these smaller notes. So talk to us a little bit about some of your favorite marketing strategies.
Yeah. Yep. So if you're starting, the best, I think there's many different websites that you can try. The one that we've seen, so a couple of them that we've seen to be pretty effective is like Land Century, Land Modo. Land.com network is great, but it's super expensive. It's very expensive, like really expensive. but but yeah, so Land Century, Land Watch. There's plenty of websites, but those have been good. Ruralvacantland.com found to be really good. We've used them. A lot of people also use Facebook Marketplace and Facebook groups. That seems to convert really well. We haven't really dove that deep into that. TikTok is what we were really big on, and we're gonna continue to keep posting content. But that's if you're into content creation. TikTok can be good too.
Got it. If someone's never gone through the funnel of actually buying a note like this, what does that buyer outward facing funnel look like? Is it like, let's say you're promoting it on TikTok, you're marketing on TikTok, and is there a link that someone can just click and then buy and then put a card down and now they have the property and you've got automated systems that send documents for them to sign and there's no calling or anything like that? What does the funnel look like?
Yeah. So when we started, it was very much automated. Like if you want to buy the property, just go on our website, click the buy now link, and put in your payment information, the deed information, and click submit. And in 2 days or so, you'll get your contract to your email.
Mm.
Now we have Mike, our sales director, and he talks to every lead that comes in and he'll walk them through any questions. And then it's like over the phone.
Got it. Got it. And why did you guys shift to that model?
Because we probably lost a ton of customers or potential customers because I was like doing too much of the automation stuff of just go to the website. If you want to buy it, click buy now. And because it got very overwhelming with the amount of leads and I was just one person trying to handle all of it. And then Mike came in and the people that go on the website and buy automatically do that anyway. They don't need handholding, but there are some customers who want to be led through the process. And those are the ones that Mike talks to.
Got it. So people can still go on your website and just click the buy now and it's automated, right?
Yep, that is
Would
true.
you suggest that people that are brand new to this go with one or the other?
I think for those who are new, I would just say to actually call and talk to the customers because that's what I did. When I started with the first 3 notes, I talked to every single one of them.
Got it. Got it.
That way you have a more direct relationship and you can manage that. And then once you hit a point where it's just too much, then you can maybe transition to some other sales process.
Got it. And so does your land loans actually process payment too?
I believed they do.
Okay, cool. How are you guys processing payments? Do you have a merchant account or something right now?
Yeah, we use MoonClerk, which ties back to Stripe, but we just have an old account. And technically, I think Stripe makes it very hard for like land and real estate businesses. So that's why I was not recommending it strongly.
Got it. Yeah. That's good to know. Really
Yeah.
good information to know. So, can you talk about what would be a piece of tactical advice that you wish you would have known when you first got started in using this particular strategy?
Like I said, is to go big as fast as you can, meaning reduce the number of transactions and increase the profitability and spread. Because it doesn't matter, right? If you even if you sell 100 properties or 10, what really matters is what was your net profit on all of your deals, right?
Right.
So it's to transition up market with that you're able to, right? So if you can buy a $5,000 property instead of a $3,000 property, do the $5,000 one, because maybe your spread is larger and you'll still make the same amount, and it just reduces the amount of hassle that you have to deal with.
Got it. If someone's just starting out in this and they want to start with the end in mind, thinking about that go big as fast as you can, is it just looking for maybe higher price parcels, or are there any other tactical things that they can do, the types of properties that they're going after that would help them to do that?
Better markets that you can charge more in, make sure that they have access and maybe the size of the property. Instead of a quarter acre, at least make it like an acre.
Excellent. Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. So, based on your experience, what's a common misconception about land note investing that you'd like to clarify?
That I love the passive part of this, like how you can very quickly, that 10 grand a month or whatever actually covers a lot of your burn rate and things like that. So it can be very powerful. And yeah, there's ways to do like large, huge deals, and that's amazing. But having a small note portfolio can and will be super useful to cover your monthly business expenses and sometimes even your personal living expenses.
That's fantastic. One last tactical question. How do you go about picking a market for these types of deals? If someone is saying, okay, I flip land, I got that down, that's my main business model, but I want to start holding notes. How do they go about finding a market to be able to get these types of properties?
Mm. I would say it's wherever they're able to buy. And I'm not really, that's actually been one of our competitive advantages, is to be able to be willing to go after different markets and not just copy. So I look for potential profit in an area, potential desirability, and yeah. So it's not rocket science, especially on the lower end stuff. Once you start going to expensive properties, you really need to understand market selection, because that customer that's putting down $200 a month for so long is not the same customer that's buying $100,000 property. It's not the
Right.
same.
So, what would be like a good cash value range if someone wants to get into this market, wants to try this strategy? Is there a range of property values that you would say this is a good place to start? If it's not the $300,000 parcels, what is it? What's that range that would be really appropriate for people to start in?
I think under 50 grand is kind of, even 50 grand is like the upper limit, but I think under 50 grand is somewhere reasonable, like total sales price. Is that could be, because then you get some larger monthly payments and you can still do some very nice property.
Is there a minimum price range at the minimum, or just,
I would avoid it.
yeah?
Like, don't do $39 a month for 36 months.
All right.
It doesn't move the needle. But yeah, go big as you can when you're starting, that your budget and your business setup will allow for. But that would said, my favorite sweet spot's about like 20 to 30. So 300 a month for 72 month comes out to 21,000.
Nice. Excellent. Very good. Is there any last little bit of advice that you want to leave us with before we open up the floor for questions?
Take the shot.
Take the shot. Do it. Just do
Yeah, that's what I would say. That's really it. Take the shot and ask questions later about.
I love it. I love it. That's the Peter way. I love that. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been absolutely incredible. Peter, thank you, thank you, thank you. Go out, do some land notes. Let Peter know how it's going in our OnlyLandFans community. We'd love to help you out with that. Until then, we will catch you in the next one. Have a great week. Be safe, everyone, and see you around. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing from other seven-figure land flippers about how they've started and run their businesses, then join us at onlylandfans.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.